People who had an affair, what's the worst thing you did behind your partner's back that you've never told anyone? I had an affair with my boyfriend's best friend. I learned that I was capable of being a complete bish, that I liked the excitement of sneaking around and feeling desired, and that it is a fast shortcut to destroying 3 lives. The best friend made a self-harm attempt, and my boyfriend and I broke up, though he never actually found out the truth. For a long time, I hated myself and regretted every minute of it, but I was young, and I was the kind of person who had to learn lessons the hard way. Now I am with the man I will marry, and I know temptation will never be an issue for me again because I understand that it is never worth the pain. Story 2. We met at work, she joined our team, and we instantly hit it off. We connected on a level much better than I ever did with my wife and shared the same kind of interests, even the small, silly stuff. We could have those casual debates about big things and little things, and we were genuinely interested in each other. At the time, my wife and I were heading into a particularly rough patch in our 7-year relationship. By the Christmas party, the inevitable happened. We ended up in the same bed, snuggling and falling asleep together. Going home afterward was awful. I could barely look at my wife or speak to her. I felt like my soul had been ripped in two. The other woman and I continued to hit it off, sitting next to each other in the office, until one day we admitted we were crazy about each other. Eventually we kissed, and it was amazing. Something magical and empowering I had always wanted. We started meeting regularly and going out, though it was incredibly difficult, as my wife had friends everywhere, and I was extremely nervous. I realized slowly that I was falling in love with her, and it wasn't just an office fling. Being near her at work was incredible, but the hard days were exhausting. I would spend the day in one relationship and come home to another. My only downtime was my 20-minute commute. Then I discovered that I had lost quite a lot of money and had to tell my wife. She went absolutely crazy, unloading on me about how much she hated me, listing everything she despised about me, saying that I had made her life miserable long before this, and that the only reason we were still together was because of our children. The affair continued for a little while longer, even as things at home deteriorated. Then I went on a pre-planned family holiday, which was terrible. Almost every day we bickered and argued, and on the way back, we had a particularly terrible row. The next day, I went to see the other woman to tell her that, although I had previously said we couldn't be together because of my kids, I was ready to make a commitment to her if she wanted. We lay on her bed and cuddled, and she told me I've met someone else. It turned out she had gone to a party, met someone she connected with instantly, and was still with him. So here I am. I've just put the kids to bed. I'll go downstairs and likely have a cold, distant evening with my wife and simply get through Sunday. On Monday, I'll go to work and sit next to someone I still love, someone I was ready to trade my life for, but who ended things just before I did. I'll listen to her tell me about her weekend. I'll nod, smile, and die a little inside. Then I'll go home to my wife. Story 3. I've been married for 9 years. Just days after our wedding, I felt an intense urge to sleep with someone else. I didn't act on it immediately, but a few months into our marriage, I went to a massage parlor with extras. The experience was exhilarating, but I felt absolutely horrible for cheating. My wife and I have always had an active, intimate life. She is open, adventurous, and willing to try new things. I love her, our relationship, and even our intimate life. However, I've always felt this urge. And over the past 9 years, I have visited massage parlors and occasionally S-workers, usually 6 to 10 times a year. I now know what I do is wrong, but I don't really feel guilty anymore. The only thing that bothers me is the money I waste. It's a strange feeling. Part of me thinks that doing this has prevented me from seeking more damaging affairs. I would never pursue an affair with another married woman. It also hasn't damaged our relationship or our intimate life. I'm not sure what to make of it. If I could stop, I would, but so far it hasn't caused any harm to my marriage. Story 4. I've been in a relationship for the past 7 years, and I've had 2 affairs during that time. My boyfriend and I got together when we were still in high school, and right after we graduated, we moved in together. He was the second person I'd ever been intimate with, and most of my reasons for cheating came from this line of thinking, I'm young and haven't experienced much. What if we're together for a long time? Do I want him to be the only person I've had good time with? Pretty crappy and naive reasons, I know. There was a guy I worked with, attractive, funny, and all that. It started with flirting at work, which eventually led to hooking up one night. It was great, so we turned it into a weekly thing. After about 2 weeks, he started asking whether I was going to leave my boyfriend and saying he wanted to date me. I had a lot of reasons to stay with my boyfriend. Shared bank accounts, I used his car, I had a crappy part-time job that didn't pay enough to support myself, and I was scared of going through life alone if I left him, and the new guy didn't work out. So I said no every time he brought it up. After a while, he got very pushy, at one point even threatening to follow me home and tell my boyfriend himself. So I ended it. My boyfriend never found out. Fast forward 1 year. Later, I started feeling like my boyfriend wasn't giving me enough attention or being romantic enough. So I began looking for someone else to give me the attention I wanted. I went online and met a guy there. We met up one day at his house and hooked up. That was the start of a 3-month affair. The banging was mediocre, but I stayed because it was something new and exciting. After a while, I got tired of leading 2 lives and broke it off with the internet guy. My boyfriend didn't find out. Aside from these 2 occasions, I also cybered with guys online and sent inappropriate pictures, but I never actually met up with them. My boyfriend found out about some of this, but not all of it. Needless to say, at certain points, our relationship was pretty rocky because of my behavior. It's been 2 years since I decided to actually give my boyfriend what he deserves and take the relationship seriously. I told him everything. The 2 guys I slept with, my reasons, crappy as they were, and that I'd also been cybering and texting. We went on a hiatus for about 2 weeks, still living in the same house and sharing a car and bank accounts. It was the most awkward time ever. He barely talked to me during those 2 weeks, and the whole time I was preparing to get kicked out of his house and out of his life. Everything was his, so I definitely would have been the one moving out. It was incredibly stressful, and I knew I had brought it all on myself, which made it worse. Still, it did feel good to be completely honest with him for the first time since I had started cheating. At the end of those 2 weeks, he decided he still wanted to be with me. That's when I realized how great of a guy I have, someone willing to give me a second chance. Even though we stayed together for a solid 5 or so months afterward, he was very nosy about everything I did. He came with me most times when I said I was going places and would randomly ask to look through my texts, which was totally understandable. Now, 2 years later, we're as happy as we've ever been. I'm very proud to say I haven't done anything a good girlfriend wouldn't do since then. And while I did some pretty crappy things in the past, I'm forever grateful that he forgave me and decided his love could overcome all the crappy things I did. What I took from all of this is that most guys are a lot crappier than my current boyfriend. I never really realized how good of a guy he is until I started talking to other guys. He actually treats me right, and there are way too many scumbags out there. I also realized it's not okay to act like a selfish child and do whatever you want without any regard for how it's going to affect someone else. And the last thing I realized is that I really do love my boyfriend a lot. Even though he could be more romantic, and even with all his flaws, I love him. I never want to be the kind of person I was back then, ever again. Story 5. Being on the yeehaw. Receiving end in one case and having a semi-interesting story of my own, at least I think so, it was shocking to me because I knew the people involved. I suppose I can bring 2 stories into this, involving my first girlfriend and one of her relatives. First, she was 16, and I was boyfriend number 10 in the space of 2 years. Since she was my first girlfriend, I was mostly focused on figuring out how good I was in a relationship and whether it suited me. I was 17 at the time. We met through a mutual friend who was both her first ex and her best friend. She was his friend when it suited him, and other friends told me he often complained about her. Eventually, we got together at a party. In the 2 months we were together, I learned more about how manipulative people can be than most people I know still have. Her biggest flaw was how she talked about her exes. Every single one of them, according to her, had treated her terribly. After I met the one she claimed to hate, the most I learned she had lied about almost everything, and that it was entirely her fault. She said they had gone out for 6 months. In reality, it was 6 weeks. Other people confirmed his version of events, and he turned out to be one of the nicest people I've ever met. Long story short, about 1 month into our relationship, her first ex moved away to college. She was devastated by it and began acting in ways that made me genuinely fear for her safety. Because of that, I felt forced to stay involved, both out of concern for her and because I didn't want to be blamed for things I hadn't done. I later found out that despite my efforts to be genuine, honest, and kind, and even letting her break up with me to avoid her using it against me, she was still bad-mouthing me afterward. Since then, I've come to terms with a lot and learned much more about what was really going on. Essentially, she had wanted to be with her first ex at the start of the summer and was rejected. A few months later, he pushed her toward me. He's the kind of person who would do something like that intentionally, and he's now kept at a very long distance from my life. In reality, she had replaced him with me, and as far as I know, she did the same with every boyfriend she had afterward. All of them were at some point good friends of his, even the ones after me. I haven't heard anything about her in about 6 months, but the last I did hear was that she was still cycling through boyfriends and making some pretty bad life choices. So, essentially, she emotionally cheated on 13 people for one guy who, to his credit, made it very clear he never wanted to be with her. Story 6. At the time, my girlfriend and I were already in a rocky relationship. We didn't get to see each other very often, which made it take a long time to get close. I told her I loved her, not because I truly felt it, but because I thought that's what she wanted to hear. She didn't say she loved me back, which was fine. I felt bad for saying it the way I did and didn't want to put her in the same awkward position. I don't think I ever told her I loved her again after that. She was very distant personally. I can't recall a single moment where she truly opened up emotionally to me. After the first few weeks, it often seemed like she had something on her mind that she wasn't sharing. Even so, she was always incredibly nice and polite. I was going through some rough stuff back then, and she would extend a simple, "You feeling okay?" without ever pushing me when I didn't want to talk. Toward the end of the relationship, my best friend at the time and I started hanging out again. She had been very important to me, and we were nearly inseparable in the years before. I didn't do it with her, but we did kiss, along with some mild groping exchanged between us. It was a sickening feeling. I felt more guilty than I ever had in my life, but at the same time, I was swept up in the emotions between me and my best friend, something my relationship had completely lacked. I should note I was just as cold as my girlfriend at the time. My best friend said she regretted it too and that she wouldn't continue anything with me, even if I broke up with my girlfriend. Still, the damage had been done. My girlfriend didn't deserve to be with someone unfaithful, so I decided to end it anyway, thinking that being single would do me some good, and that being alone was what I deserved. It was really hard because she was so nice. Before I even had the courage to tell her, she ended things herself. Eventually, I told my best friend, and long story short, we dated for a while after that. There were good times, but it didn't take long before things got rocky. Drama was everywhere, and I was definitely at fault for some of it, but she turned out to be very emotionally manipulative. Then she went and slept with a bunch of guys behind my back. Imagine my surprise. She actually recently contacted me on Facebook, trying to reconnect. It's been years since all of this, so we were talking about how different we are now. But it only took about 10 messages for me to realize she was the same person I stopped talking to all those years ago. Needless to say, we don't talk now. What I learned is how important it is to not let relationships get to breaking points like that. If you're interested in somebody else, it's so much better to end things honestly. Even if it's just a phone call, you're still a million times less of a jerk than someone who cheats. Part of the problem with my relationship with my best friend was that I held on too long. The relationship became emotionally painful, and I stayed for months trying to make it work. I shouldn't have let things get that bad, and neither should anyone else. If someone isn't right for you, move on. Don't waste a good person's time, and don't let a toxic person waste yours. Life is too short for unhappy relationships. Story 7. It wasn't me cheating, but I caught my dad having an affair when I was 13. I didn't have my own email yet, so I was using his. Being completely technologically ignorant, I misclicked on an email, read it, then another, and eventually I wanted to throw up when I realized what the first one had implied. As a 13-year-old, I was in complete shock. I felt like my dad had cheated on me, like he didn't want me as a son, or any of my brothers for that matter. I ran to my neighbor crying, asking for a drive, and then went to find my mom and told her. When my dad came home, he confronted her, and I felt like I couldn't trust anyone in the world. Parents are supposed to be the people you can always count on, and I felt utterly betrayed. On top of that, my dad was an alcoholic. He's way more in control now, and my mom was a nagger. That combination led to a lot of domestic disputes and yelling, which only made everything feel worse. I watched my mom open the door on the highway and threaten to jump in front of me and my 6-year-old brother. It was a traumatizing experience, but it made me vow that I would never cheat on anyone as long as I lived, and I haven't, even with my current partner for 2 years. My parents resolved things slowly over time, but my dad definitely paid dearly for it, and my mom didn't make the process any easier. We only found out recently that she has a brain disorder that causes a lot of emotional issues. Still, I love both of my parents very much and have forgiven my dad because he's truly a great guy. Good people can do bad things. They're still together, though I've always believed it lasts mainly because of my mom's economic dependence on my dad and the fact that there were 3 kids to consider. Story 8. My mother was the other woman. She worked as a nurse at a hospital, and my father was a doctor. They had worked together for many years and always maintained a friendly relationship. At the time, my father had been married for 15 years and had 3 children, while my mother was single. Over a few months, they grew closer as my father's marriage was in trouble. He claimed he had never loved his wife and had felt pressured by both families to marry her very young after sleeping with her. They were both from a small, heavily Catholic coal mining town in Scotland. They began a long affair, and my mother was fully aware he was married. Sometime into the affair, my mother became pregnant with me. From what I understand, my father was around a lot during the pregnancy and even after my birth. Things became more complicated when his wife found out about the affair. On one occasion, she showed up at my maternal grandparents' home while my mother and I were visiting, when I was still a baby. I am not sure how she tracked us there, though she may have followed my father. She confronted my mother angrily, but caught a glimpse of me through the door and quickly left crying. I suppose she knew he had cheated, but not that I existed. As I grew older, my father came around less and less. The last time I saw him was on my 4th birthday, when he dropped by to deliver a present. In the end, he chose to stay with his wife and continue his life as if nothing had happened. As a strictly Catholic man, he would rather spend the rest of his days with someone he did not love than get a divorce and break up his family. His children, friends, and colleagues remain unaware of what happened. Because of these events, I was robbed of a relationship with my father, and my mother was left to raise me alone. I am now 28 years old and married to the love of my life. I can honestly say I would rather divorce my wife if things ever became unbearable than cheat on her while still married. Things can get very messy and complicated. Story 9. We were teachers in the same building but at different grade levels. She sent a school-wide email about organizing an after-work aerobics class. I dropped by her room to ask if it was okay for me to join, joking that I was going to wear my leotards. I had no intention of actually joining. It was just a way to flirt with her. She later told me that's when it started in her mind. She began calling me every time she went for a drive. It seemed harmless at first. I often worked late after hours, and she knew because of all her calls. That eventually led her to dropping by the school, still seemingly harmless. One day, she asked me to go for a ride with her. She asked if she could hold my hand while she drove. If I had had a spine or a moral compass, that should have been a definitive no. Instead, we drove all around town holding hands. She dropped me off at the school, and as I started to walk back inside, she said, "You know what? I hope I can stop myself from doing." I walked back to the driver's side window and asked, "What?" She said, "This," and kissed me. My head felt like it was going to explode. It was such a rush. At a school assembly, she found an excuse to whisper to me and brushed her lips against my ear. The intensity of it was overwhelming. She completely owned me. I was like her puppet. We even got caught by the police at a public park near midnight. We suspected he had used night vision to watch us because he appeared right after we had gotten back together. The officer went to the same school as her and her husband. After that, she shut it down. We had one more encounter after a Christmas party, and then nothing else. I still love her and would do anything for her. She divorced her husband, married someone else, and divorced again. We live in different states now. Did I learn anything from it? Absolutely not. I fell deeply in love and never cared about her flaws. Story 10. I was the one who got cheated on. We had been together for a while. She, who I'll call Ellen, was deeply ashamed of her body because of her dress size, even though her overall frame was 3 to 4 sizes smaller than what her bust required. Because of that, she was extremely prudish about her body. She didn't like physical closeness, didn't like being held, always dressed too warmly for the weather, and absolutely refused to accept compliments. It was always, "No, you're lying," or "No, you're just trying to make me feel better." No, I genuinely thought she had a great body and was reading far too much into it simply because the average woman with her frame is an A cup and clothing is sized by the largest measurement. At the same time, as an aspiring author, some of the things she wrote would have made the author of 50 Shades blush, including exploring a non-consensual fantasy. After everything unraveled and we went our separate ways, that became a very different conversation. She called me every name in the book because I took "not tonight" to mean "not tonight" rather than "I'm ready. Try your hardest to bruise my hips while I beg anyone in earshot to call the police." Between semesters, we lived about an hour apart, so I would make the trip once or twice a month. On campus, it was more casual, seeing each other on a whim. I probably should have suspected something when school started back, and every "let's get dinner" was met with, "Okay, I'll call Rick and meet you there." At the time, I figured it was fine. Our circle often ate as a group anyway. That, too, became a different conversation after we went our separate ways. She accused me of never taking her on a proper date, yet whenever I asked her out, she would bring Rick, at minimum, and usually 1 or 2 of her friends along. Around Halloween, I popped in to surprise her, only to have her roommate say, "She's not here. She forgot something at Rick's and crashed on his couch." Just before Thanksgiving, Rick's roommate, let's call him Mike, called me. "Hey man, I just walked in on Rick and Ellen. I'm not trying to start trouble, but I thought you should know." Looking back, I was an idiot for playing dumb. I gave her plenty of opportunities to be honest about why we ended up on the rocks, and every time she fed me one of the same BS, non-committal excuses we all know too well. Not ready for the next step? It's not you, it's me. And so on. I should have confronted her head on. Looking back, that was the only way I was going to get her to own up. And what I wanted more than anything at the time was for her to own up so I could hate her guts instead of being heartbroken. After it all came undone, I was left grappling with an identity crisis, and she went full on soap opera. If I so much as left my dorm room while she was nearby, I'd have to deal with campus police. If she saw me out of the corner of her eye, she'd call them, claiming I was after her. I got pulled out of class, pulled out of meals after the one dining, hall closed for renovations. It got to the point where I knew every campus officer by name. They even suggested a restraining order, but there was no point. It would have meant one of us had to leave the school. Well, it's life. I wasn't long for that school anyway. It was the perfect storm of poverty. My family couldn't afford books, and I didn't have enough in scholarships or loans to cover them. Unreasonable expectations. My mother sold me as some inhuman super student who would find a way to graduate in 3 years with a 4.3 GPA. I may be a certified genius, but I'm still human. I'd never really been challenged in high school, not even in honors classes. I was attending that school on borrowed time. It was only a matter of time before I ran out of money, bit off more than I could chew, or both. It turned out to be both at the same time. 10 years later, I still haven't found the one, even as all my friends are getting married and having kids. But on the bright side, I've still got a good life. A lonely life, but a good one. And maybe that's the way to hurt her memory the most. After all, living well is the best revenge, right? Story 11. I was married and completely unhappy. My ex-wife and I were both at fault, maybe even more so on her side, for the unhappiness. We had zero communication skills, and I just didn't feel loved at all. I started culinary school, a late start since I had joined the military right out of high school, and ended up meeting a woman in my class. We hung out once as friends, and it was absolutely perfect. We laughed, smiled, and talked about everything. It was literally the best day of my life. At that point, my marriage was essentially over. I'd already expressed my desire for a divorce. Nonetheless, I began an affair with the woman from class. Eventually, my ex-wife found out, which was disastrous, and she was devastated. I do feel horrible about that. Today, I'm with the woman I had the affair with. 3 years later, I've been happy every single day, and I look forward to what tomorrow holds for us. I went through hell, but now I have heaven. Story 12. I was in a relationship with a guy for 2 years when I cheated on him. I loved him, but he didn't love me, and he was very degrading toward me. I was working the night shift at a gas station where the local police like to meet up and hang out. I started to become really good friends with a few of them, and a couple of weeks later, one of them started texting me. He was married to a woman whose family basically owned the town we lived in. They had married because he had gotten her pregnant, and he was miserable too. The first night we really started talking about being together, I thought he was just messing with me. I was 18 and very naive. He was 32. He invited me over one night, and I went. He made me mix drinks, and I got a little tipsy. We ended up doing it. I went home and cried for hours. I loved my boyfriend. How could I do this to him? I'm actually crying while writing this. Then things went from bad to worse. My cop wouldn't leave me alone. He called and texted me constantly and would guilt me into doing it with him. Eventually, I told him I wanted to end it. After that, he started following me and my boyfriend around, pulling my boyfriend over for no reason. My boyfriend had suspicions, but I lied to him. Then his wife called me. She said she knew what was going on and asked me to record everything, so she could get full custody of their child. I felt so horrible that I agreed, thinking it might somehow cancel out some of the bad I had done. I told her everything. I truly believed that would be the end of it, but he kept following me and calling me from his friends' phones. The wife then told everyone what I had done. They went to my boss and told her I was an S-worker, and they spread rumors that I had AIDS. This man was only the second person I had ever been with. Having an affair ruined many things in my life. It was 5 years ago, but I still think about it every single day and hate myself for it. This is why I don't feel like I deserve any kind of happiness. Story 13. I cheated on my boyfriend of 3 years when I was 18. I met a guy in a club, and we dated for 2 months before I got the courage to break up with my boyfriend. I didn't tell him the real reason because I didn't want to hurt him more than necessary. He was a very good guy and had done nothing wrong. I just told him I wasn't in love with him anymore. It was really sad. He cried a lot. We stayed friends for almost a year until he told me it was too hard for him to see me just as a friend. After that, we stopped hanging out and talking. It was 6 years ago, and I still feel guilty because I know it was really hard for him. Even if we were very young, I'm still in a relationship with the guy I cheated with, and I'm still in love with the boyfriend I left. Story 14. I got married quite quickly after meeting my now ex-husband. We were both in the depths of depression at the time and somehow saved each other from that for a while. He was a virgin when we met. He was 25 at the time, but eager to learn. I thought that in time, the physical thing would move past the going through the motions stage and become passionate and loving. It didn't. I'd always been very intimately active, whether in relationships or single, having one-night stands and flings. Over time, we also realized we had very little in common. I was social and loved going out drinking, dancing, and partying, while he preferred to sit at home on the internet for hours and hated being around other people. After we had been married about a year, I ran into a guy I had gone to school with, someone I had always considered the one who got away. We had slept together a handful of times years earlier when I was single, and his marriage was in a lull. Of course, the chemistry was still there. We would meet during lunch breaks or after work, and end up sleeping together or having huge makeout sessions in his car. We admitted we had feelings for each other. After several months, he completely disappeared. He stopped replying to my emails, which was the only way we communicated so we could keep everything secret. I was hurt, but I carried on with my marriage. A few months later, the man I had the affair with contacted me and said he had left his wife. He told me it had nothing to do with us, and that he hadn't told me earlier because he didn't want me to leave my husband for him. That wasn't what he wanted. I told him it was better if we cut off all contact and that my husband should never find out. Even to this day, he has no idea. I also made out with a few other random people I met and never saw again. He, and no one else in my life, ever knew about those either. 2 years later, I came home one day to my husband telling me he had slept with a woman he met online a couple of times and that we had to split up. Somehow, it felt different from what I had done, because he had only ever slept with me and had no confidence at all. I managed to rationalize my own actions through that thinking. So, we split up, and everyone thought he was the bad guy. I got everything I deserved. He is now in a new relationship and very happy. Meanwhile, I am still single 3 years later, with massive trust issues, both with other people and with myself. Being hurt by someone I thought would never betray me made me afraid of my own ability to stay faithful. I don't trust myself not to stray again and hurt someone I care about. I broke myself as a result of my affair. Story 15. Everyone here is so noble. My wife and I were fighting terribly. We stopped doing it. He was abusive and difficult. So let me fill the a-hole quotient for this thread with my horrendous story from a few years back. Full disclaimer, this was the worst experience of my life, which otherwise has not been privileged, and I deservedly carry some form of PTSD from it. I met Stacy around Christmas. I thought she was stunning. Blonde, smart, and just plain fun. So I tried to put the moves on her, but got shot down. She slept with a friend that night, that kind of girl, which I actually love. I put her out of my mind. A few days later, I met Jen at a bar. She was great, smart, kind, from a good family, well-to-do, an outstanding cook, and a redhead. Her only flaw was that she was a little corny and had a slightly unhealthy preoccupation with settling down, a common early topic conversation. She had a wild side too, which I loved, but it was nothing compared to Stacy. Both of these women were a few years younger than me. By spring, Jen and I were spending more time together. While I enjoyed her company, I noticed we lacked a certain fire or spark. She was exactly the kind of girl your mom would want you to end up with, and she was also great in bed. But something was missing. So I made it clear that we weren't exclusive, and she seemed fine with that. A few months later, I ran into Stacy at a bar where mutual friends were throwing a party. This time, we clicked. It was electric. Some people just mesh perfectly, and we did. I resolved to do the right thing and tell Jen that while it had been fun, we should just be friends. But for some reason, I waited. Jen was going away for the summer anyway, so I figured she would move on. Big mistake. Stacy and I started seeing each other more, and I was seeing both of them with increasing frequency. Stacy asked to be exclusive, and I agreed. All that was left was to tell Jen it was over, but before I could, I had to fly out of town for work. Long story short, Stacy slept with someone else while I was gone and lied about it. Worse, she contracted a curable STD and had the audacity to accuse me of giving it to her, which was impossible since I always used condoms and had been tested a week prior. Disclaimer, I never got it. So I held off on breaking things off with Jen. I dumped Stacy and told her to stay out of my life, but she didn't take it. She lingered, promising to reform and fix everything. I was torn. Then Jen abruptly left town for her scheduled trip. Suddenly, it was just Stacy and me. That summer, Stacy and I made up. We reconciled, and I promised myself that as soon as Jen got back, I would end it. Before Jen returned, Stacy and I got into a massive fight. I started wondering if I was looking for a reason to end things with her, if I resented her for what she had put me through. So, when Jen came back from her holiday, ecstatic to see me, I didn't end it with her either. I did the worst possible thing for my soul. I dated both of them at the same time. My thinking was completely flawed, but I convinced myself that one of them would eventually dump me. It had to happen. I had essentially abdicated responsibility for the decision and handed it over to them. Part of me even assumed I would be caught quickly. I never was. Neither of them dumped me, and for more than 1 year, this completely broken situation continued. I slept with both of them, went out with both of them, and some of my friends even met both of them. I felt like the worst kind of criminal, constantly hiding my life from the people closest to me. If anyone is reading this, please hear me. It destroyed my spirit and ate away at my soul. I lived in constant dread and exhaustion, desperate for the situation to end but unable to face it head on. By this point, Stacy had pretty much reformed. She never lied, and our love and spark seemed so real. But I had tainted it all with my deception. Not a deception born out of a desire to sleep with two women, but out of indecisiveness, and, to some extent, the knowledge that if one relationship failed, the other would continue on its own. 2. Coexisting safety nets while I walked a razor-high wire. The biggest reason I could not make a move was simple. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. In fact, I wanted myself to be hurt more than anything, for both of them to hate me and leave me. I thought about telling them I had cheated, but realized that while true, it would crush them. People who realize they have been deceived suffer far more long-term psychological grief than the deceivers and question everything. I didn't think they deserved that. Finally, I had to make a call. Stacy was the passionate is right choice. Jen was the safe, felt right choice. But by splitting my time, my mind share, my life that way, I had never truly seen either of them, or my own feelings. Was my resentment of Jen's corniness just compensation for being around Stacy so often? Was my coldness towards Stacy an act because I knew how warm Jen could be? I became meticulously deceitful, like running a spy operation, adept at plausible excuses, aliases, and justifications for everything. The longer this continued, the greater the potential suffering for one or both of them. I made my choice and stuck with it. Breaking up with one of the women was heartbreaking, and I immediately felt like I had made the wrong choice and would be haunted forever. I still feel that way, but by then, both relationships were so tainted that any choice felt false and wrong. My companion and my ex still have no idea of the massive deception I carried, and I will probably take it to my grave. Story 16. I was the other woman and the cheater. I slept with my next-door neighbor while he was engaged, and later married. I was still very young and naive. It happened over several months when I was 16 and 17. He was a musician, an artist, and attractive as hell. I was completely smitten. My ex was friends with him, so they chatted a few times. Eventually, they started texting back and forth, but he used my phone because he didn't have one of his own. One day, my neighbor texted me, and we started talking about music and everything else. It quickly got flirty, and I found myself crushing on him. My ex had borrowed money from him at one point, and I went over to pay it back. That's how it started. We had to arrange our get-togethers around both of our partners' work schedules and my need to find a babysitter. I was a teen mom at the time. I ended up breaking up with my boyfriend during this period, but he stayed with his fiancée, of course. The relationship was dying shortly before he got married because I wanted something serious, but he didn't want to commit to a 17-year-old with a baby. Completely understandable, but I was crushed. I was in love with him. I learned not to trust the nice guy because even a good, seemingly decent guy cheated on his fiancée with a teenager. I also learned that I never want to be the other woman again. Story 17. I was in the relationship of my life when it happened. I was madly in love with the girl I was with. We had been together for a few years, dating back to high school. By then, we were both in college, and times were changing. There wasn't really anything wrong with our relationship. We loved each other, liked many of the same things, and there was little to complain about. I'm a rather quiet individual, and she was the type who could make friends with anyone. This sometimes drove me to jealousy because I could see it happen before my eyes, a skill I could not replicate. She started meeting new people to hang out with, while I did not, and that was where things began to unravel. She wanted new experiences, and I was more reserved than she would have liked. I didn't want to hold her back, so I let her enjoy her social life with her new friends, mainly guys. But that left me alone for large chunks of the week. We were both working full-time and going to school full-time, which left very little time for us to be together. I would try to schedule my work and school around hers to make room for quality time, but the time we had was slightly misused. I ended up alone more often while she went out more. She was never the cheating type, but what made me hesitate was that I was almost never invited to any social gatherings with her and her friends. Many months went by where I would hear these great stories about her friends. Stories I wished I could relate to, but I couldn't. I knew their names and could remember small details of past stories, but I couldn't put a face to the name or an encounter to the person. This wore on me greatly. I began snooping through things just so I could plan my own activities instead of letting her leave for the night. I would search her phone for messages like, "We're going to dinner, X night. You should join us," so I could make plans for myself before she told me she already had plans. In the back of my mind, I hesitated because I knew I might find things I didn't want to see. Part of me hoped that maybe this time she would extend an invitation to me, but no. I only found flirty messages to people I didn't know. I became self-conscious about every part of myself, and now I'm snooping. What type of person am I? But I held it in. I didn't let it destroy me, and I told almost nobody about what I was feeling. At work, I had a very sweet coworker who noticed I seemed drained over this period and would ask me what was wrong. I kept silent, repeating the same short responses I gave to others. My lips were sealed. One day, I had had enough. My therapy appointments couldn't come fast enough, and I had very few people I could talk to about it, so I broke the cycle. I broke down, and over the next 2 weeks or so, I went through every detail of my relationship with this coworker. Surprisingly, she was impressed with my ability to process and analyze everything under so much pressure. Still, I was as in love with my girlfriend as I had ever been. We had broken up before, but always gotten back together with a more mature and passionate start each time. I had even bought the ring she wanted and was ready to tie it all together when the time was right. But that time felt nowhere in sight. As I started talking to my coworker more, my plans with my girlfriend began to feel distant. I couldn't see the future I had imagined anymore. I began questioning every decision I had ever made, and it pushed me over the edge. After work one night, I decided to settle in by myself, have a beer, and enjoy some time alone. Then, I got a call from my coworker, who was dealing with problems of her own. Come over and talk. Fatal words, spoken under the influence. The beer caught up to me, and my alone time became something else entirely. That night was the first time I cheated on my girlfriend. For the next year and a half, it destroyed my mental state. I kept it a secret, but when my coworker told another coworker, chaos ensued. Everyone knew, except my girlfriend. I buried the truth under everything I had, but it still exploded in my face. When she finally found out, I felt forever indebted to her. Anything was suddenly fair game. I had no leverage, but I stayed with her because I believed that was what I wanted. I fell into a deep depression for about 6 months, overwhelmed by the damage my actions had caused her. I was wrecked. Eventually, I sat my family down and told them, just as I did with hers. By that point, there was nothing left to save. We no longer had a relationship. That was the end. We broke up and now talk very seldom. She is still the love of my life and forever will be. I still have her ring by my bedside along with everything we shared, and it hurts me deeply. I can't say that I wouldn't do it over if I could, but I wish I had directed my actions towards someone else. It was my first relationship, my first long-term relationship, and also my most recent. I now have a completely different thought process when negotiating with myself over simple things, small tasks, and what makes me happy. I honestly cannot tell if I was truly happy over the last 2 years or if I was just convincing myself. I've slowly put the pieces together to make life manageable, but the road is long, my friends. Once you make that corner and deviate from the norm, the next stop is very, very far. Story 18. I had been in a long-term relationship, and it was practically falling apart. He was abusive both emotionally and physically, and even though I was in denial, making excuses for him and accepting his alibis, he had been emotionally cheating on me with several people from the very beginning. I struggled to cope with the abuse, and eventually my depression returned, this time with anxiety as well. I stopped going out, neglected my health and appearance, and effectively cut ties with all my friends, leaving me with no support network except for my boyfriend who brushed me aside. Around this time, I started talking with a friend I had been interested in a few years ago, but we had both been too shy to confess our feelings, so nothing ever came of it. I had always been attracted to him and allowed myself to, I thought, harmlessly flirt. What stood out most about him was that he genuinely cared. I told him what I was going through, and he was nothing but supportive and attentive. As our relationship progressed and my boyfriend grew more distant and uncaring, I became horrified with myself. I was determined to set things right and fix my relationship. Then, an unforeseeable, life-changing event occurred, and I found myself in dire need of support. My friend stepped in. He went to great lengths to ensure I was happy and retained some level of emotional stability. In turn, I fell in love with him. I ended up seeing him behind my boyfriend's back for several months, hating myself every moment of it. I tried to leave, but returned each time my boyfriend was abusive. Meanwhile, my boyfriend, unbeknownst to me, had already fallen for another woman and was making plans to leave. Eventually, he did. Without him, I regained my health and sanity. Unfortunately, I also realized that my friend and I were not right for each other, and that my love for him had been fueled by a need for care and support. I tried a few times to start a relationship with him, but I didn't feel the same as I once had and ended up hurting both of us, which I deeply regret. Now, we are just friends, but I remain profoundly thankful to him for everything he did for me during those dark times. I have learned that it is never worth staying in an abusive, unhappy, or deteriorating relationship out of fear of ending it. Story 19. I am the cheater. This is pretty recent, so I'm taking this chance to let it all out. I had been engaged since high school for 5 years. We went to the same college and lived together. I returned home last Christmas to finish school. Both of us were depressed and burned out, and out of state tuition was expensive. I managed to land my dream job, and we had plans to move into a rental house. My new job was an hour away from the house, but I didn't mind because this job gave me the confidence and pride I had never felt in my life. I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. My newfound confidence wasn't just because of the job. This career is male dominated, and I was enjoying the attention. One guy and I started talking and really hit it off. We had some things in common, and I saw it as an opportunity for a new friendship. After all, the best friends I'd had in high school were guys, and I really wanted that back. We talked, texted, and hung out after work. He would flirt more, but I always brushed it off, thinking I was overanalyzing. Eventually, though, I realized I wanted more too. We talked about our relationships. Oh yes, he was married with a child, and how unhappy we were. This led to the decision that we could have fun together, thinking that if it made us happy, our home lives would improve. At first, it was just texting. It made us happy, and we had fun at work, going home with smiles. But it didn't last long. We ended up doing it several times and even booked a hotel room one night. It went from friends to casual banging partners to lovers, and even plans to leave our spouses. At one point, I truly thought he loved me, and I loved him. All of this happened very fast, just over the span of about 2 months. One night, we ended up drunk at his house. His wife was there too, and all bare in his pool. She saw us close at one point, but she didn't know we had banged all over the house while she passed out. She questioned him later but was forgiving until he told her the truth. I took that moment as my chance to finally tell my fiancé what I had done, something I had been wanting to come clean about. I was heartbroken at first. I lost 2 men I loved. In the end, my fiancé and I worked things out, and the other man did the same with his wife. I regret this more than anything I have ever done. It is hard to believe I even did this. Everything happened so fast, and I still do not understand what I was thinking during that time. That was not who I am. Now, I feel as though I will never be good enough for him again. I hate what I did, and I struggle to forgive myself for the pain I caused the man I love, as well as the woman and mother I hurt through my actions. Cheating is never worth the pain. If you are unhappy, say so. It hurts to tell your partner the truth, but that pain is nothing compared to discovering betrayal or seeing the person you love break down because of something you did. The look on his face the day I told him still haunts me. I hope it does not sound as though I am portraying myself as a victim or trying to excuse my actions. I have no excuses. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I did it anyway. I let selfishness guide me, and it hurt people who did not deserve it. That is something I will have to live with and take responsibility for. Story 20. I had an affair this year. I hate talking about it because I am deeply ashamed. I'm not sure you could even call it an affair, as we were not married yet, but we were in a very serious relationship. We always fought. She has 2 beautiful children from a previous marriage, and I spent a lot of time and money providing for them, yet I never felt appreciated. As our fights intensified, she became ill and had to go to the ER. She first told me it was a kidney problem, then said she had a miscarriage. 3 weeks after the doctor told her that. 3 weeks after that, she discovered the baby was alive in an ectopic pregnancy, meaning it had implanted in her fallopian tube instead of her womb. She told me she had to take a pill similar to an abortion pill to end the pregnancy for her safety and claimed she had taken them all, but in reality, she had taken none. Our baby suffered and died at about 2.5 months gestation. I didn't find all of this out until much later. The lies and deception hurt me deeply. She constantly framed the situation as though she was the only one affected, which sent me into a dimension of anger and pain I can't describe. In response, I signed up for an online dating site and met a girl. We had an intense but brief affair for about a month. I initially justified it as revenge for what had happened, but I soon realized I was being petty and that the only person I was hurting was myself. I confessed to my partner, and we will be married for 2 weeks as of Tuesday. If you ever find yourself in my shoes, don't take the petty route I did. Mistakes happen, but we can all learn from them and make things right. Story 21. When I cheated, I think it was more about wanting to escape my current relationship than anything else. I wasn't happy with the girl I was seeing, and I wanted an easy way out. I would go to the mall every day on my lunch break and talk with the girl who worked at Sparrow's. It was obvious we liked each other, so we started going out. A couple of months later, my girlfriend noticed I had been acting strangely and went through my phone while I was in the shower. I had deleted all the texts from the other girl, so that wasn't an issue. However, I had forgotten to delete one text I'd sent to a good friend, mentioning that I was dating 2 girls right now. She saw it but didn't confront me until the next day. All hell broke loose, but in the end, she still wanted to be with me. I eventually had to come clean that I simply didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. I realized I could have saved both of us a lot of trouble by ending things honestly from the start. Story 22. I was married to the girl I had loved in high school. She was beautiful and smart. I was overweight, unattractive, and not very bright. Still am, mostly. We got married because we were both 25, single, and thought, well, we're great friends. If anyone can make this work, we can. Wrong. I started by sleeping with a coworker before we were even married. After we moved back to our hometown, I slept with some of her friends, then other women I met online, plus friends of the women I slept with. I even got a lot of referrals. Eventually, one of the women fell hard for me and tracked down my now ex-wife after I dumped her. I came home to find the house empty. We got back together and worked things out, but a year later, I slept with an ex-girlfriend. A couple of weeks later, her boyfriend showed up with a U-Haul. A month later, my wife and I were divorced, and she married him. No excuses, no nothing. I was an insecure, selfish man in desperate need of validation. And there's nothing better for an insecure guy than listening to a woman in ecstasy. Finally, I figured out my problems, worked to change them, and I consider myself a decent human being now. If I were to get married again, I wouldn't have any reason to look outside the relationship. Story 23. I was married and in a long-term dead bedroom situation. He was a coworker, a superior actually, and also married, also in a dead bedroom. Let's call him P. I was instantly attracted to P, but acting on it never crossed my mind. I assumed he was happily married, and besides, he didn't seem particularly interested in me. We had a lot in common, but didn't talk much at work, so I simply nurtured a lustful crush and assumed it would stay in my imagination. One night, P's wife was out of town, and I had plans to go to a bar after work with some friends. On a whim, I invited P, and I was surprised when he said he'd be happy to come. I was even more shocked when he actually showed up. We spent the night splitting pictures, getting wasted, and talking about our respective miserable marriages. We admitted that we were both in marriages with no physical intimacy, frustrated with our frigid spouses, and devastated by the lack of intimacy. Then, I will never forget this moment, we looked at each other and admitted we were wildly attracted to one another. We didn't act on it that night, but we very nearly did. The tension was absolutely palpable, and the next day at work, a Friday, we shared an exciting secret that was deliciously thrilling. That night, P invited me over to his house. His wife was still out of town, and my unsuspecting husband was happy that I had a work friend to hang out with. I went over, and we spent hours in his basement drinking and talking. Eventually, we hooked up. I got home around 3 a.m., and my husband was furious. He had been calling and texting nonstop, convinced I had been in a ditch somewhere. When I got home, we had an epic fight, and that was the beginning of the end. He forbade me from contacting P outside of work. I promised I wouldn't, and then promptly did. Anyway, months of tangled lies and horrible confrontations followed. P's wife found out, my husband found out, and I am fairly certain that everyone at work knew too. By this point, P and I had fallen in love, and we were torn between wanting to make our marriages work, wanting to try a relationship, and trying to keep doing our jobs. Did I mention that both P and I were terrible alcoholics? We brought out the worst in each other. He drank to blackout on a daily basis, and together we developed a dangerous habit, going out to a bar, getting completely drunk, and then drunk driving somewhere to hook up. I couldn't handle the stress of trying to balance a crumbling marriage, a growing alcohol and drug addiction, and a stressful, miserable job, so I gave my 30-day notice. Around that same time, my husband and I decided to divorce. P and his wife wanted to make their marriage work, and I felt that, even though I loved him and was on the verge of some seriously reckless behavior, I needed to do something right for a change and remove myself from their lives. While I am disgusted with many of my behaviors during those 10 months, I do not regret what happened. The affair gave me the impetus to leave a crumbling marriage. If it hadn't occurred, my ex and I would probably have stayed together for a few more comfortable but unhappy years. He and I are still friends, and we are both remarried. P is still with his wife. I can't imagine their relationship is perfect, but I hope they are able to find some happiness. Last I heard, P was sober. I'm celebrating 2 years of sobriety next month, which is a very good thing. We both likely would have died if we had continued down the path we were on. Story 24. I cheated on my now ex-girlfriend one time. I was at a wedding and hit it off with one of the bridesmaids. It started at the rehearsal dinner, where I was joking around with my buddies and included the bride's friends to break the ice. At the reception, we all did a few shots, drank a couple bottles of champagne, and danced the night away. The after-party was in a hotel suite with drinking games and her sitting on my lap. Neither of our significant others were there, and her friends and my friends did nothing to stop it. In fact, they encouraged it. We lived far apart and planned to meet up again, but that never happened. We both acknowledged that it was wrong, though we kept talking for a few weeks afterward. She eventually stopped talking to me after our plans fell through and told her boyfriend about it. As far as I know, they lived happily ever after. Or not. I never checked. I never told my girlfriend. I knew nothing good would come of it. At the time, we were in a rough patch, which we eventually worked through. Later, she moved, and we struggled with long distance for a couple of years before mutually giving up. We still keep in touch, and she found someone far better for her. I'm happy that she did. Story 25. A long time ago, I was with a girl I truly thought I was in love with, but over the course of our relationship, she became increasingly difficult. She turned into something of a monster girlfriend, and being young, I didn't really know any better. I thought it was a phase, or that she'd grow out of it, or maybe that I was to blame. In reality, she had been given everything she ever wanted in life and seemed to have no concept of empathy. She also had rigid, outdated beliefs about men's and women's roles in relationships. Her expectations of me changed constantly, and if I failed to meet them, she would get angry. She frequently told me that I wasn't good enough. Meanwhile, a student I was tutoring had a very clear crush on me. I rejected her at first and ignored her. But about a year later, she came back into my life when she enrolled in another one of my classes. She claimed she wasn't interested in me, but after about a week of tutoring, that changed. By this point, my girlfriend had become even more difficult, and after one argument, which I can't even remember the cause of, she decided to play hardball and ignore me. I ignored her too. 3 weeks of no contact later, I was doing it with the new girl. I did not feel guilty. I was happy to be with someone else. My ex eventually crawled back, and I told her to leave me alone. To this day, I do not feel bad about what I did. While the new girl ultimately wasn't right for me, she helped me realize that I was still desirable, and for that, I am grateful. After that, I dated a fair bit and eventually ended up with my current girlfriend, who is a wonderful person. Given the circumstances, I truly can't feel bad about what happened. Story 26. I met the love of my life while I was still married to someone else. It was one of those oh crap moments. Before that, I didn't really believe in soulmates. I thought we were all just human. You pick someone you like, someone you get along with, and admire, and you make the most of it. I had an incredibly romantic beginning with my first husband. It was so romantic that when I wasn't fully feeling the relationship, I questioned myself and wondered what was wrong with me, which led to a lot of depression and misery. After getting married, I began pursuing hobbies that felt more conducive to a settled life. Club dancing and running around didn't seem appropriate anymore, so I explored some of my old, geeky interests, like reading comic books and knitting. I made friends at a knitting group, one of whom played Dungeons and Dragons, a game I had always wanted to try. They invited me to their regular gaming group, partly to avoid the endless conversations about exploding diapers among the other moms at the knitting group. I showed up at the gaming group and tried to figure out character sheets and the awkwardness of starting role-playing. There were a few guys there, and one of them said, "Oh man, all the good ones are married," when he discovered that I was already taken. I blushed and thought to myself, I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear that. A few sessions later, I was sitting across from him and finally got a good look. He was kind of cute, and then I noticed a star tattoo at the base of his neck, and it was like a bomb went off in my head. In my mind, I heard a dramatic, oh crap, Doppler effect style. It was love, even if I denied it to myself. If I had been single, I would have recognized it immediately, but being already taken fuzzed my feelings a bit. Years earlier, I had worn a star necklace that I adored, a gift from my grandmother, until the chain broke. The necklace had always sat in the exact spot where his tattoo was. I'd always felt that the star necklace was a sign of something, though I didn't know what. But here was the sign right in front of me. I knew I was in big trouble. I wasn't sure what to do, but pretending I didn't see it seemed like the best course of action. We continued gaming together. I listened with keen interest whenever the star tattoo guy shared something with the group. He seemed really cool, smart, and funny. But we never hung out outside of our gaming sessions. Over time, I realized that my marriage wasn't working, but I didn't know how to move forward. I spent a summer doing things that made me happy. I watched the movies I wanted to watch, went on adventures even when my husband didn't want to come, went out with friends, and traveled. At one point, I started hanging out with Mr. Star Tattoo Guy, just as friends. It began when my husband refused to join me for anything I wanted to do. It was fine if I watched his favorite movies or attended his concerts, but God forbid I asked him to go to something I was excited about, even if I thought he would enjoy it. I sent out a text to all my friends offering a free ticket, and he was the only one to say yes. During our time together, we discovered that we had a lot in common. Same college degree, favorite movies, and similar values. I enjoyed hanging out with him and found our conversations far more satisfying than those with my husband. I realized that I had more fun with this friend than I did with my own husband. Around him, I felt more like myself. Mr. Star Tattoo and I never shared our feelings with one another, nor was there any physical connection until after I told my husband it was over. But there was certainly an emotional affair. I regret that someone had to get hurt for me to be with the love of my life, and I struggled with guilt for many years. Leaving and recovering was some of the darkest times of my life, but it was also the best thing I ever did. The affair never truly ended. I eventually married Mr. Star Tattoo Guy, and we have 2 children together. He is my best friend, and I had no idea I could be this happy with anyone. We've been together for 6 years, and every day we look at each other in amazement at what we went through to be together and how well it has worked out. We never take each other for granted. We rarely argue, we collaborate, and we are grateful for every day. I'm even grateful for my first marriage because it showed me what I needed to be happy and what I didn't want in a relationship. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that life is too short to remain unhappy. When you find a spark of happiness, you have to grab onto it and hold on, even if it means walking through fire to keep it. As a result, I became more determined, more confident, and yes, even happy. It's okay to make mistakes. Story 27. I'm a 35-year-old man and I've had a close friend for 8 years. She's kind of like the female version of me. We worked together every day for 4 years, talked openly about physical intimacy, partied, and even went away as a fake couple to a wedding with our friends. One of us has always been in a relationship, which meant we never pursued anything romantic. There has, and probably always will be, a sense of unfinished business between us. Now, I've been in a relationship for 2 years with a woman I love deeply, who I see myself growing old with, and unlike anyone I've ever been with before. But during this time, I've hooked up with my old friend. She was in a relationship at times during this as well. Writing affair makes it sound simpler than it was. I think the long-standing friendship and romantic dynamic, combined with both of us being in relationships, made it feel less illicit. It became more than a one-off encounter. And yes, I've thought about how I'd feel if the roles were reversed. I'm under no illusions about being an a-hole. We're good friends. But the intimacy, which has always been incredible, gradually intensified. I often ended up taking a dominant role, and we developed a secret life of passionate correspondence and encounters. It became so powerful, respectful, and freeing that it was almost narcotic. At times, she felt the same, including the withdrawals. I fell in, not love, but something. She has recently found someone she now loves, so we have both stepped back, me respecting that and leaving her alone. It felt like I'd lost her. The same feelings of sadness and loss that come with any breakup were clouding my days. But I'm happy for her, for both of us and everyone involved, because we both needed to transition out of what ultimately should have been a very close and powerful relationship that was never fully realized. I knew I was being a fool. If my girlfriend ever found out, it would devastate her, and I would regret it for the rest of my life because she's amazing. The feelings I had for the other woman were too strong, and I was too weak, letting my emotions and my desire take control. There will always be something between us. It's just a question of how brightly that light burns over time. I guess I've learned that love and friendship, intimacy, and morals, people, are not as simple as the rules and expectations society gives us to navigate life. Just don't be an a-hole and only hurt yourself if you end up being one. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.